everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Celeste. Thanks for joining me today. Well, if you saw the opening footage of this video, then you could see just how gorgeous the sunflowers are at Hopkins Farm this week. Today I'm sharing part 2 of my very first summer book haul. If you did miss part 1, I've posted the link down towards the comments below. Please check that out. The first book that I'd like to chat with you about today is Persuasion by Jane Austen. This is definitely a favorite of mine, and this is a part of a set that I invested in this summer. I decided to get the Vintage Classics editions, and I'm really loving them. They're very readable copies. They're soft cover, but at the same time they're very durable, and I do enjoy the cover illustrations by Sheridan. So be on the lookout for this set. It's really nice. Persuasion is one of Jane Austen's last novels, and it's the story of Anne Elliot, who is a 20-something young lady living at home with her family, taking care of them, taking care of the household. She has sisters who don't treat her very nicely, and she has a father who is a baronet who squanders money. And because of his squandering, they're forced to move to smaller lodgings in Bath. Well, in her travels, Anne runs into Frederick Wentworth, who she was once engaged to, and because she was given some well-meant advice by a family friend, she turned him down and he went away. Well, now he's back. The boy is back in town, and so this is sort of the story of their awkward meetings in town squares and in shops, and also when they go to Lyme Regis. So it's really fun to read, and Jane Austen has a really good sense of humor. I love the scenes where they encounter each other in public and have to deal with the niceties and, you know, being polite to each other, and one gets the sense that there may still be some feelings there. And I think that Persuasion, more so than some of Jane Austen's other novels, has a real sense of maturity about it. I think that's one of the reasons that I really enjoy it so much. Some of the other novels, for example, Emma, are also considered really humorous, and, you know, Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, of course, have very clever, biting wit, and the relationships are very, you know, romantic. This has a sense of romance as well, but I would say it's more mature and more smoldering and sort of slow burning, and I really enjoy that. And I hope, if you haven't read this one yet, I envy you. I hope that you'll give it a try. The next book I'd like to talk to you about is called Jane Austen at Home, a Biography by Lucy Worsley, and this is a hardcover published by St. Martin's Press. I really enjoyed this book as well. I had never read a biography of Jane Austen before, so this was my very first one. And, you know, and not being a Jane Austen aficionado, I don't know if it's the, you know, quote unquote right one to start with or not, but I really did enjoy it. I'm sure you've seen Lucy Worsley on television. She's very well known. She has tons of documentaries. She is the chief curator for the historic royal palaces. And I love how Lucy Worsley imbues everything, all of the everyday objects of home, with a sense of Jane. So finger rings and candlesticks and an ink pot and even a stain on the ceiling, you know, just sort of becomes, you feel like you're in Jane Austen's world, truly. You know, the linen on her bed, the dress that she wore. So I really recommend giving this one a try. It's a great kind of reference book that you can set down and pick up at leisure. You don't have to read it cover to cover. You can do it by, you know, read a couple chapters here and a couple chapters there. One of the things that I didn't know that I found fascinating was that she had a brother that was kind of written out of the picture. His name was George, and I'll speak about him in another video at some point because I think it's really important to do that. But George was apparently a child that had fits of some sort, neurological fits, and it may have been epilepsy, I don't know. Excuse me. But he was sent away, and it's not that he was just sent away, he was literally written out of their family story to make it seem as though he was a brother who didn't exist. So there's a whole kind of palimpsest of history there. How many of our family members throughout time have been written out of the picture or painted over with a different narrative? That was very touching for me and something that was kind of hard to read about, but very worthwhile, and I thank Lucy Worsley for bringing that to my attention. I did want to read you a little passage here. So in this particular scene in a chapter called Enter Jane, so this is when Jane was a child. On a fine summer evening, Mr. Austen had traveled to Andover to collect his daughter from the hands of her uncle and brought her home in a hired carriage. But then when they were almost home, Mr. Austen and Cassandra met upon the road Jane and Charles, the two little ones of the family, who had got as far as New Down to meet the chaise and have the pleasure of riding home in it. You must know, as Jane died so young, that this story of her life does not end happily. But please, do fix in your mind the sunny scene when she was 6½ because in this beginning there is also much that prefigures our devastating end. Imagine Jane happy, if you will, life before her, running through the Hampshire fields on a summer's evening, eager to see Cassandra once again and to bring her home. And the first time I read that, that brought tears to my eyes because I can just see it. It's quite cinematic. You can see Jane running with the carriage, always sort of off by herself, but a satellite. Yeah. Thank you, Lucy Worsley. Great book, and I'm looking forward to some other titles by Lucy Worsley as well. Well, another book that I enjoyed this summer is another novel by Jane Austen, and it was Sanditon. Do you ever enjoy the scent of a particular kind of book? I do, and this one is just marvelous. This was a book that I found used. I think I got it from Abe Books, and it was like $6. And this is Sanditon, Jane Austen, and Another Lady. And this particular edition is by Houghton Mifflin Company, 1975. And it's missing its dust jacket, but I actually like the laurels on the front and the sort of sea blue soft cloth cover. And so I confess I did only read the 11 chapters because that's what I was primarily interested in this particular time around, but I do want to read more of the work by Marie Dobbs, who is the other lady, Another Lady. Sanditon tells the story of Charlotte Haywood, who is a young lady. She meets by chance Mr. and Mrs. Parker, and they invite her to come stay with them at Sanditon, which is an up-and-coming resort that's kind of in development. It's real estate on the coast, a sort of Lyme Regis-like atmosphere, and they'll be offering the bathing cure, which was so popular at the time, and the health benefits of the seaside air. We meet the rest of the Parker family, of course, including one Sydney Parker, as well as other characters such as Lady Denham, who is the wealthy lady of the town, and also Miss Lamb, who is a young woman from the West Indies. So even though it's only 11 chapters long, I really have to say that this book has become really super meaningful to me. It's almost, the quality of the writing is kind of like a daydream. It's as though, you know, on a summer day you fell asleep and now you've woken up and you're not quite awake yet, and you had a very strange dream about a fantastical place along the ocean, and it becomes kind of a liminal space between the sand and the sea and the air, which is sort of half there but not there, and it's just over the hill, and the characters are fantastic, and it's a bit Oz-like in that sense, as though you've been at a fair or a carnival and met some wonderful characters, and now you're not sure whether it happened or not. And so it's just really interesting prose writing for me. And you know, you're also reading the book with the knowledge that Jane was ill and that she wouldn't be finishing this. And to me, it's a different kind of writing. There's still a sense of humor, and it's still definitely Jane Austen, but there's also kind of a lightening of her spirit in this, and it seems as though she's starting to let go a little bit. So yeah, I strongly, strongly recommend this. You cannot say you've read all of Jane Austen unless you've read Sanditon. And the next book that I would like to share with you is The World of Sanditon, The Secrets, Romance, and History Behind Jane Austen's Final Story. And this was the official companion to the ITV series. It's written by Sara Sheridan with a foreword by Andrew Davies, and it is from Trapeze Books. Again, I found this for $5 or $6 online, and I'm really super surprised at how much I enjoyed this. I confess I bought it as kind of a fan book because I really like the series, and I thought it was going to just be interviews with the cast and you know, photographs from the sets and all of that, and it is. I mean, that is included in this. But there's really a lot more in here. And my only regret is that it doesn't cover season 2 or the upcoming season 3. So this is just about season 1. But I think if you can find a copy, it's well worth it if you're a fan of Jane Austen and of that time period. There's all sorts of things in here. I've marked a few spots just to show you. There's a page from the original manuscript of Persuasion, and all kinds of things. If you're interested in the season and when that was, what it meant to be a ward, as Miss Lamb is, it goes into health and health cures and makeup that women wore at the time, or if they didn't have anything, how did they make themselves look more youthful or beautiful. It talks about bathing cures. It talks about the clothing that one would bring to the seaside, and it talks about the actual bathing machines and their construction and the cure and all of that, and also why real estate was developing along the coast and how that became kind of a thing in Jane Austen's time, and in fact, of course, to this day. But it's really just a fun addition to your Jane Austen and social history library, and I recommend it. Another book that I'm really eager to share with you, just because it is so beautiful and so lovely, is Dress in the Age of Jane Austen, Regency Fashion by Hilary Davidson. This book was actually, I believe, recommended by Lil of Lil's Vintage World, which is a blog that I follow. So thank you, Lil. This was a fantastic recommendation. And Hilary Davidson, who is the author of it, is fascinating in and of herself. And I did a little bit of research on her, and I wanted to read you a bit of her story as well. Hilary trained as a bespoke shoemaker in her native Australia before completing a master's in the history of textiles and dress at Winchester School of Art. As a skilled and meticulous hand sewer, she's created a replica of clothing projects for a number of museums, including a groundbreaking replication of Jane Austen's pelisse. In 2007, Hilary became curator of fashion and decorative arts at the Museum of London. She curated an exhibit on pirates while continuing to publish, teach, and lecture in the UK and internationally. In collaboration with the Museum of London Archaeology, Hilary began analyzing archaeological textiles. She also worked on the 5-star rated Early Modern Dress and Textile Network and is an expert shown on a number of BBC historical television programs. So I think she's as fascinating as Jane Austen in some ways, and this is a really gorgeous book for any Jane Austen lover on your list. Hilary divides this book. First of all, look at the end pages. Before we even get into the book, I have to show you these end pages. They're just wonderful. And the cover is wonderful. It has kind of a linen-y feel to it, and the back is equally beautiful. But anyway, she divides the chapters of this book into, well, let me see if I can find it here. Introduction, self, home, village, country, city, nation, and world. And this is just a lovely thing of beauty to look at. I mean, there are paintings. Don't know if you can see that. There are many examples of dress from the period through lithographs and illustrations and postcards. And the paper is very rich and creamy and glossy and thick. It's just wonderful. I'm trying to, oh, here's one. Look at this one. Just absolutely gorgeous. So, I absolutely love it. And it even talks about accessories. So we're talking about reticules and stockings and hats and gloves and muffs and so forth. And the thing that was super special for me, I am interested in miniatures and dolls, and when I was a young girl I made a peddler's doll and won actually an art show. And it had a basket of all the wares that she was selling. And I was very excited in this book that Hilary Davidson gives a depiction of a peddler doll from 1820. And her name is Sara Thrifty, and I'm in love with her. She's just lovely. And in the other photograph, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but it's all the little wares that she had in her basket, all the little trinkets. So this is a really gorgeous edition for any Jane Austen lover, and it would be great as a gift to give for a birthday or at Christmas time too. Sugar in the Blood is a book by Andrea Stewart, and I don't think you can really talk about the Jane Austen era or the Georgian or Regency period or the colonization without talking about slavery and without talking about the elephant in the room, which was ownership and using humans as a commodity. Well, Sugar in the Blood is Andrea Stewart's family story of slavery and empire. She is a Barbadian British historian. She was raised in the Caribbean, later in the United States, but she started out in the Caribbean. She was doing some genealogical research and actually discovered that within her own family there was a slave owner and there was a plantation. But she never really understood what the connections were, put the dots together, and so she did some research and found out that her own ancestor from the 17th century actually did own slaves. And so she begins a self-examination about skin color and being black, being white, being of mixed race, and what that means, and how she would then process and crystallize this information and talk to her own kids about it. And, you know, sort of fit all of those pieces together within the context of her life and within the context of history, and coming to terms with this ancestor that she talks about. So I'm really looking forward to this one and to learning from it. And finally, the last book that I'd like to talk to you about today is The Fossil Hunter by Shelley Emling, Dinosaurs, Evolution, and the Woman Whose Discoveries Changed the World. This is the story of the paleontologist Mary Anning. Mary Anning was born in 1799 and died in 1847, and this nonfiction book tells the story of her as fossil hunter and seashell collector and exhibitor, and most importantly, as a paleontologist who was the very first person to discover a plesiosaur. And if you have ever heard the nursery rhyme or recited the nursery rhyme, "She sells seashells by the seashore," then you know Mary Anning, because that's who the nursery rhyme is actually referring to. And she did have a shop in Lyme Regis where she sold seashells and trinkets and ammonites. And she is the subject of a movie, which you probably know, which was really, really well done. It's kind of a imagining of a romance or a romantic life for Mary Anning. And it really evokes the zeitgeist, the time period of Lyme Regis and the Jurassic Coast and the town and the beaches and the poverty that she lived in and the weather and all of that. It's really worth a watch. I really did enjoy this book, which I found to be quite factual and traces more what we truly know about Mary Anning. And there's all kinds of really fascinating anecdotes in here, including an episode with a lightning bolt that happened when Mary was just a baby. But Mary Anning lived in a man's world and in a profession where men took all or most of the credit, and her discoveries are just integrally important to what we know scientifically today in the story of evolution. This is a very readable and entertaining account of her life, and really just shows how women can get written out of history. It's a very quick read and very accessible, and I think it's a really good addition to anybody's library collection. That's all the books that I have for today. I hope you have enjoyed part 2 of my very first summer haul. And it's August. If you have time, I strongly suggest, if you have the means, to get yourself to a field full of sunflowers this month and enjoy the golden splendor. You will not be sorry. Have a great day. Bye-bye.